Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, Technical Agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator. And on this week's Field Friday segment, I kind of wanted to touch on something we're all seeing if you drive around the country now. We've got a lot of water hemp out here that, we talked earlier this year, we had a tough year for weather to try and control weeds, and of course water hemp's being our major target weed that's the toughest, and you can see what happened. Drive around the country, very representative field. There's very few what I would call clean bean fields. You've got, problem that I see coming, just one little seed head just full of seed. You can see what that plant has on it. There's a lot of weed seed getting built up again for next year. I think we want to make sure that we evaluate our herbicide programs as to, is there a reason why we failed? I know my suspicion is we have a lot more PPO resistance than we've ever had before starting to show up. That would be your burners, your Cobras, your Warren Ultras, any of those burner type herbicides, not counting Liberty. That's a different mode of action, but there's an awful lot of that got sprayed this year, especially on these extend fields when we got past the deadline and didn't have the ability to spray extend anymore. And in some cases they didn't do a very good job. If they were burnt back and just didn't quite die because they weren't young and actively growing anymore or under drought stress, that's different than if they didn't get touched. And we had both this year. If we didn't touch it, we need to know that for future reference, because that's kind of going to have to be taking that tool out of the toolbox, that those burners are not going to be a useful tool in that field anymore. If it did burn it and just didn't quite kill it, we may want to look at something else, but that could be an option just because, we might have better weather next year to work with. But I think we need to make sure we understand that in some of these fields. We obviously know we have Roundup resistant water hemp everywhere. I think we're starting to see a pretty good evolution to the PPO resistance, the burners. And then there's something else that I want everybody to kind of take note of this year. When we're combining corn, I see more water hemp coming through our corn programs than we've seen for a long time. I've got, some field footage here of what the corn is showing us. You can see there's water hemp that got away here. Whether it came up after it was applied because we didn't have enough rain for the residual activation, or maybe we had stuff that just got sprayed, got sick but didn't die, or didn't really get sick even. Again, we kind of want to evaluate that, but what we really want to know going into next year, I think this is important, make notes of those fields that have a lot of water hemp in corn. Once we spray corn, shortly after that the corn canopies, we kind of assume we controlled everything. And I've had more than one person kind of mention there's some water hemp sticking above the corn now, what's going on? I suspect we've had some water hemp get away in the corn the last couple of years, but just didn't notice it or didn't make a note of it. I'd like everybody to kind of make a note this year where we've got a lot of water hemp coming through on these corn programs. We're going to know we've got more weed seed to deal with next year, because that's all going to go through the combine. There's lots of seed, as we looked at here, that's going to be in the seed bank, the weed seed bank. I guess my biggest thing is understand herbicide prices are increasing with the rest of everything else with inflation. Our logistical shipping challenges are hitting us there too. I know it's going to be higher, but we need to make sure we're investing enough in a herbicide program. Guess what? I'm afraid you just will figure $20 an acre increase over last year or more, not necessarily all in price increases, but we need to really consider making sure that we do everything we can to make sure this water hemp doesn't even come up. How do we do that? Increasing the rates of our residuals to, basically near the maximum rate if we can. It just seems like if we can have enough invested in our pre-program, usually we get enough control where the stuff that comes later we can still get it. But if we have stuff breaking through because our residual's petering out before we get that far, and we've got water hemp that has any size to it, I don't care if it's Liberty or Enlist or whatever, they get really tough to kill. And if we get another year where we're really dry and hot during the summer and weed uptake is not very good with the herbicides, we're going to have a bigger problem. So I guess I would just want you to make sure that you make a note when you're combining corn. Do you see a lot out there? You know, it seems easy. We've got water hemp in the beans, we know that, but after you combine and we're sitting down in December, January, February, whatever, putting a program together, we may not remember exactly where all the worst fields were unless they were really bad. So maybe make some notes on that before we have it all combined and all digested out of our mind. So just wanted to start looking towards next year. I have a lot of guys say, well, there's nothing I can do about it this year, why worry about it? That's true, but let's not let fields look like this next year if we can help it. And some of those things we can control, so let's do a good job of putting a good plan together. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.